Welcome, everyone, to RB1: A Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Fake Teams Podcast channel. I am the consummate professional, first ranking officer of the Terry McLaurin Stand Club and Grand Marshal of the Alvin Kamara Apology Parade, BFS with the Oracle as well. Your humble host, Pete Rogers, and I am joined by some of the guys, maybe at some point all of the guys, but right now we've got the Duck Father, foreteller of Devontae Parker's breakout, DK Metcalf's #1 admirer, and caster of the double reverse chutzpah, resident old man Clark Barnes, and Scotty Miller fanboy, Mule Skinner of the Zachards Decline Wagon, King Lizard of the Alan Lazard Hype Terrarium, the Coach Whisperer, the Wine Sipperer, the Will Disleyer, Working Girl Jordan Smith. Guys, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Pete.
Doing well. Might have to adjust that intro from Will Disley to something involving Big Bob Tanyan. It's like I went out and got a new wife.
I know you've well, in a way, you've upgraded. Will Disley has not done for you what Bob Tanyan has done this season so far.
Well, Greg Olsen would just get back in the booth and get out of the way. Just let Will Disley cook.
I feel like there's like a very inappropriate women in the kitchen joke that is there with Greg Olsen being in the booth. I don't know. Something was
get
there.
Get back in the booth and make me an analysis or something. I don't know. Cut this.
You did it better than I did. All right. Well, we've got we're going to go through all the games as we do. Week 5 starts and sits. But before we do, I'm going to set a timer so that this does not become the talk of the show. We're setting it for a nice, 3 minutes. 3 minutes sounds good. 2 to 3. 4 minutes. 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Setting it for 3 minutes. COVID has made its first real pass in the NFL, and I personally wanted to voice my frustration with the NFL right now. Delaying the Titans-Steelers game was the right move, and they might have to do the same thing this week with Titans-Bills, as the Titans still can't get their shit together and kind of quarantine. But when Cam Newton tested positive for COVID and the NFL decides that delaying the Patriots-Chiefs game 24 hours is good enough, that's the beautiful cocktail of incompetence and willful neglect that we've come to expect from the league. The Patriots traveled in separate planes to Kansas City with players who were in close contact, isolated from the rest of the team. Players like Stephon Gilmore, who tested positive today. And yet, despite the fact that they had 2 planes traveling to Kansas City, one with players who had been in close contact with Cam and ones who hadn't, all of those players still played Monday night. It's just clear that the NFL made no attempt to think ahead about how to handle a potential outbreak, despite the fact that they had all offseason to do this and time to watch both the NBA and baseball come up with something. So I just want to say my frustrations and get it out into the world. But that is what I have to say on the matter as we enter week 5.
That seems reasonable, Pete. I think to peel the onion curtain back, we had a bit of a chat before we got started on this, and my thoughts were, hey, man, if we're going to talk about it, we're going to talk about the whole thing. I started thinking about what we've been going through for the past 7-8 months as a country and all of this stuff. And, oh, man, it got me hot and bothered. I started doing my research. I've got like 2 pages worth of notes here.
Oh, no.
And I feel like what you said was totally reasonable. And, related to football. So I think that's a reasonable expectation that they would have taken some different action here, as much as it might have hurt viewership or been an inconvenience. We would have watched the game on Wednesday night later. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think ultimately what this comes down to is like, this was the NFL's choice, is just to kind of be reactionary rather than, getting ahead of it earlier in the season, because I don't really think it's that reasonable for them to be able to do what the NBA did, and that's kind of keep a self-contained bubble, fewer people to just keep track of, less space needed, etc. So I think somebody at some point had to have said early in the offseason, like, you know what, this is going to be a problem at some point. Just, statistically, somebody's going to get it at some point here, and they just don't really have a contingency plan for moving the games, which is what they should have focused on a little bit more. I like the idea of them being able to postpone games and kind of like swap out bye weeks, but if this is something that can be pervasive and take like several weeks to kind of get the all clear from people, especially if people keep on, getting getting positive results back, then it's not something they can do. Like teams don't have multiple bye weeks; they only have the one. So I don't know if this keeps on happening, where we keep on losing games, and like the Titans game might just flat out be canceled, or no, not canceled. The Titans might have to forfeit one of these games at some point. I think at some point, if you're Titans ownership or whoever was on board with it last week, saying like maybe we should just press pause for 2 weeks and get everybody cleared up and then give it another go. Yeah, I'm not sure what more they could have done. They just are flying by the seat of their pants, basically.
All right. Well, our timer went off, so that is it. No more conversation about it until we get to Buffalo, Tennessee, which is 2 games into our schedule. But we'll talk about how to maybe best set your lineup for that. But let's start off. Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading to Chicago to play the Bears on Thursday night football. Jordan, this is going to be very intriguing. I'm very interested in what your guys' vibes are for this game, because the Bears' pass defense has actually been really good. They haven't allowed a passing touchdown to a wide receiver this season. And the whole Buccaneers receiving crew is banged up all kinds of sorts.
Yeah, the Buccaneers receiving crew is pretty banged up. I think we saw today that was it yesterday? It doesn't matter. Chris Godwin's not going to play. Let me see here. Justin Watson, LaShawn McCoy, all out. OJ Howard, I think, is done for the season. Not that he was like an
torn
extremely
Achilles.
Big factor. Yeah, Achilles is tough.
It hurts.
Yeah, he was definitely in there, and that's just it turns into one less mouth to feed. Mike Evans has been playing strongly. My boy Scotty Miller, he definitely deserves a spot in the lineup. I think that just the way that the Tampa Bay offense has clicked last week and kind of over the last few weeks, I think they're starting to get some things going. I don't think Rob Gronkowski is much of a factor in the passing game. Who knows? He might take a bigger step up this week, but he's not sucking up a whole lot of targets. And I see Miller has double-digit points in 3 of his 4 games. So that just puts him closer to must-play status. I'm going to play him as a flex player this coming up week. A lot of it has to do with people not being able to play because of COVID designations or for the myriad soft tissue injuries that we've been seeing. But it helps that Scotty Miller, 12th in DYAR and 9th in DVOA.
It's your boy ballin'.
He's balling. On the other side, is another Miller that I'm just probably sitting, and that's Anthony Miller. At least for the foreseeable future, we're not sure how things might change slightly with Nick Foles being there, but I think Nick Foles is kind of Allen Robinson rightfully should be his favorite target, and so Allen Robinson hasn't missed a beat. But looking at Miller's snap share, he just got to 70% last week. The previous weeks he was 58%, 39%, and 43%. So I don't think he can be trusted all that much. I might be worried about him and David Montgomery just because the Bucs defense has allowed the 12th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. They're 4th in pass defense DVOA and 2nd in run defense DVOA. So they're kind of doing some things.
Yeah, a little worried about what Chicago's going to do just because I think that Nick Foles is an upgrade. But I think that the Buccaneers are kind of rounding into form. I think one of the interesting things that we've seen out of the Buccaneers is that after a really bad first week from Mike Evans, there is definitely no bad blood between Brady and Evans, at least on the football field. Evans is kind of the go-to man with Godwin being out. Watson and Miller have both stepped up in different games for the Buccaneers, and Brady's been using them pretty well. They're struggling, but I think they're putting it together, and I think they'll have enough to defeat the Bears. And despite the high-scoring affair we saw with the Chargers last week, I think this is going to be a relatively low-scoring game. But like you mentioned, this is kind of like bye week plus of needing to maybe play it safe with some of these guys in this early Thursday night matchup.
Awesome. Let's move on then to the first games of Saturday. Los Angeles Rams heading to Washington to take on the Washington football team. And the big news here, you guys, is I know I'm telling Clark this for the first time because Clark deleted Twitter off of his phone, and we are his source of football information. Dwayne Haskins is gotten the bench, and the Washington football team will be starting Ron Rivera's own Kyle Allen, who was so great for the Panthers last year. I had a really hard time ranking the wide receivers for this game, as both Washington and the Rams are top 5 in fewest points allowed to wide receivers. Cooper Kupp, I'm just trusting can kind of get what he needs to get because of his PPR and just the amount of receptions he sees. Robert Woods, I'm a little worried about, given that he's a little more touchdown reliant to get you points, and Washington has been very good at limiting touchdowns. I am very, and I would love for one of you guys to talk me through this. I am very nervous about Scary Terry this week. Obviously, he's going to get the Jalen Ramsey treatment, and I just don't know if that means, like, I don't know if Kyle Allen is going to pepper Scary Terry with targets if because he's the best receiver, or if Kyle Allen is going to basically just like, we're just going to leave, Terry McLaurin alone, let Ramsey cover him, and I'm going to instead utilize Antonio Gibson and Logan Thomas, two positions who Kyle Allen like really focused on when he was with the Panthers last year. Greg Olsen had almost 600 yards, and obviously Christian McCaffrey went 1,000 for 1,000. What are you guys? What's your confidence in Scary Terry this week?
Honestly, it's a little bit rattled because I don't see Kyle Allen as much of an upgrade at all, actually, over Dwayne Haskins. I think Dwayne Haskins has been playing fine, maybe not from like a real football standpoint, but from a fantasy standpoint, he's made Terry McLaurin a must start for the past couple of weeks now. And I didn't see a whole lot of Kyle Allen movement in some of the leagues I'm in, not even the dynasty leagues, but of course that's just a few leagues, you can't take that verbatim. But I went and made the move for Alex Smith because I think we are closer to seeing Alex Smith on the field than we would see a revert back to Dwayne Haskins, because Haskins got bumped not just to the bench but to the third string.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm picking up there. I know you were talking about Terry McLaurin, but I'm
I
telling
like
people keep an eye on Alex Smith.
the fact that Alex Smith even is like flirting with playing time is incredible.
I don't know how you can get away from McLaurin. Ramsey is good, but last year we saw Kyle Allen funnel targets to his stars, and I think that a lot of good backup quarterbacks understand that if they're going to have to chuck it up to someone and just make the read before they even snap the ball and stick with it, then throwing to someone like Terry McLaurin is probably a pretty good idea. I don't know how you can get away from him. If you're so stacked that you're choosing between like DJ Chark or Terry McLaurin, then I would certainly go with McLaurin. But if you're thinking like Justin Jefferson or Terry McLaurin, I don't know how you could get away from Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, for the record, I have Terry McLaurin actually below all of those guys in my wide receiver ranking. I have him as wide receiver 20. Justin Jefferson, I have as wide receiver 19 for this week. I'm novious. And I am the captain of this Terry McLaurin Stan Club, and yet somehow.
I wish my trade partners thought so highly of Justin Jefferson. Gosh.
They're playing the Seahawks. I mean, we're going to get to that game, but good Lord, I hope Kirk Cousins lights them up. All right, well, let's move on to the Buffalo Bills heading to Tennessee to take on the Titans. Obviously, who knows if this game is going to happen, which is a bummer because this was going to be the first time we'd see A.J. Brown this season, and going up against a Bills defense that, while, like Nick says, he loves to say, the Bills defense is designed to shut down, perimeter receivers. Well, A.J. Brown works all over the field, and my guess would be primary a slot guy against this Bills defense. And the Bills have struggled against slot receivers, so A.J. Brown could have a really nice welcome to the 2020 NFL season. But all signs are really pointing to this game not happening. I don't know if there's a way we want to talk about how to survive players you're going to have to bench, but hopefully we'll get to some of those.
I wanted to talk about this last week. Didn't really have a good chance to do it. So I usually like to run really slim rosters, meaning I'm going to have one quarterback and one tight end and one defense. And I will take my chances on bye weeks replacing those folks. It gives you a lot of flexibility to pick up those backup running backs. And every once in a while you get lucky and you already have someone when the big guy goes down. That gives you a lot of leverage going throughout the year. Now this is something happened once, it's an anomaly. Something happens twice, it's a trend. This is definitely something that we need to prepare for. So in a lot of my leagues, I've gone and picked up a backup quarterback, a backup kicker, as much as I hate to say it, and a backup defender, especially in FFPC leagues. The FFPC changed the way that they did waivers. They're doing one waiver run Sunday morning. So all of you that play in those leagues, heads up, that's a new thing. But what this does for me is instead of running those lean rosters, I really got to start thinking about having viable backups instead of just my starters and then a bunch of shots.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully in this situation, you have fantasy leagues starting to either manually revert to this or like the sleeper app, for example, as designated COVID as like a thing that they get tagged with, even if they're not really sick with it, but you can put them on IR. So you might need to maybe barter with your league commissioner to add an extra IR spot or two, just, so you can hang on to some of the guys, are going to be able to bounce back. Nobody wants to cut Derrick Henry for a week or two and, get into a fight to get him back. On the fantasy side, Corey Davis is out for sure. And I'm not really, I don't have a strong feel for the Titans because I haven't seen them in a couple of weeks now, and I have a very short-term memory for football. And
the Titans play to their level of competition, so they should play well against the Bills.
That's fair. And yeah, I think that I really want to look and see how the Bills' backfield is going to pan its way out. Devin Singletary has been a solid fantasy start the past couple of weeks without Zach Moss in the fold. Zach Moss was out, and I'm not really sure why he was out last week. I can't recall seeing anything on that, but if he's back, it could muddle things up, or maybe Zach Moss isn't going to be a factor for a while.
Yeah, and the Bills, they once had a tremendously stout defense. They're giving up the most yards per carry to running backs. So Devin Singletary could be in for a good game.
And really, really good to keep in mind with that. The Bills' defense has looked stout, but their offense is getting so far ahead of people that opposing offenses have to open it up. So I think that they are still good as a front seven and that their secondary is still strong. But other teams are doing well against them fantasy-wise because Josh Allen is so good
to keep up with them. Yeah.
Right. So something to keep in mind. Man, talk about a secondary I'm afraid of. That's the Bills. I think you're all over Jonnu Smith already because you're excited for this. And so that's not really actionable advice, but probably a down game from the receivers, unless A.J. Brown gets in there, and then we just totally
fingers crossed. I would love to see me some A.J. Brown. All right, let's move on to the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. Do I bench Miles Sanders this week? That is my question, because Miles Sanders has done a whole lot of nothing so far. I mean, along with this entire Eagles offense. He's seen reliable work, but just hasn't been able to produce. And they're going up against the Steelers defense that has been tremendous against running backs, allowing the third fewest points per game to the position right now in terms of fantasy. Clark, are you with me, or are you going to help me, pull me back from this ledge?
So, I mean, instead of who, I'll ask, and you can think about it or look it up. Miles Sanders is really good, and I just keep expecting this Eagles team to be completely different from what I see from them each Sunday, and I chose those words carefully. So I expect the Eagles to turn it around because they have such good playmakers. I believe in Carson Wentz. Miles Sanders is good, but they're having such a hard time with their offensive line, and they don't seem to be making adjustments to put players in a good position to succeed. It would be really hard for me to get away from Miles Sanders. I mean, I'm starting him over lots of kind of auxiliary guys. Like I do him over Duke Johnson, even though I think, or David Johnson, even though I think David Johnson's going to have a big game. I mean, probably over Gibson even, but okay. That's tough.
Yeah.
But I held on to T.Y. Hilton until last week too, so I have a tendency to hold longer than I should.
Yeah, I think that Miles Sanders might still have some of the benefit of the doubt. We talked about this the other day on the podcast that the Eagles' offensive line just they've done a whole lot of reshuffling and it just hasn't gelled or coalesced together. And Carson Wentz is not playing very well. I saw a stat today that because Dwayne Haskins got benched, that he has like the lowest completion percentage on like either catchable balls or he's thrown the most uncatchable balls, something like that. But it was below Dwayne Haskins, so we'll leave it at that. But he also, at the same time, if you got somebody who's maybe getting some upgraded looks like Joshua Kelly for the Chargers, Antonio Gibson, we just touched on him. He's getting more and more involved in the offense. You can see that on a week-to-week basis. So if you're worried about Miles Sanders, especially against a good Pittsburgh defense that has a week of rest, then perhaps you make Miles Sanders earn his spot back. Maybe give him like a ceremonial spot in the flex, or just pull him out of the lineup altogether. Like just go full on Magic Juju with it.
Perfect. Yep. And then tweet it at him so that he can then retort that he doesn't care about your fantasy team. Players, I've heard NFL players love to hear that you are either benching them because they're not playing well or that you need a certain amount of points from them for your fantasy league. That's fantasy players or NFL players love to hear that. So bombard.
Absolutely. They enjoy it.
On the flip side, Deontay Johnson is back this week, and you should immediately insert him in your lineups because he is the wide receiver one in Pittsburgh. So don't forget about Deontay Johnson, who is out with concussions, but now he is back and he is about to torch this Eagles secondary. Let's move on to the Arizona Cardinals heading to New Jersey to take on the New York Jets. More breaking news here, you guys. Joe Flacco time. Sam Darnold is out. He is ruled out this game with some busted shoulder thing. So Joe Flacco is in, and Jordan, I have to take this moment to give you some beautiful social media shout out, because when Joe Flacco came into the game Thursday night after his injury, you had an exceptional response to Joe Flacco taking the field.
You know what? It gave me big, like, guess what? I'm back energy. And Joe Flacco is in our lives again for at least another week.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Someone asked me on Twitter where Jamison Crowder was in my wide receiver rankings, because I go to wide receiver 48, and I said Jamison Crowder is not in there for a reason. He is not a top 50 wide receiver for me this week. The Jets offense is trash, and don't even think of playing anyone on it.
I just still am kind of basking in the wonderfulness that the Texans GM decided to act before the Jets GM.
Absurd.
And then just fearing with everything that I hold dear football-wise that Adam Gase is going to be wearing Texans red and blue next year doing this to them. I don't know. Joe Flacco is Sam Darnold has his problems, but he's a pretty good quarterback. And what we saw out of Joe Flacco a couple of years ago in Denver was not promising. So I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, at best, if you wanted to take a shot at whoever is playing running back for them, because I think Frank Gore is down, and I think that Lev Bell
is playing running back for them
still in the hole, serving his coaching irritated suspension. I don't know. So maybe the running back from the Jets, but otherwise, like, I don't want any part of this game.
No. But
but that's it.
You know who does want a part of this game? That's right. It is the Oracle start of the week.
This is the Oracle. My pick for this week is Kenyan Drake. I sense that he is keeping himself mentally as well as physically fit, which is very important in times like this. So he will be able to bring 100% to his game.
That was the Oracle's start of the week.
learned the Jets not playing the Broncos again this week. Now that I've had time to think about it. Funny how that works.
So yes. So the Oracle thinks Kenyan Drake will be a RB1 this week. Top 12 running back facing off against the New York Jets. Let's move on. Las Vegas Raiders heading to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. Anyone to specifically talk about, or are we just going to fire this game up to chalk and continue down our merry way?
I mean, I think you start your studs. I think Mecole Hardman's been coming on a little bit and looking good. But no, I mean, I just, mea culpa. I was really wrong about Darren Waller. And it just seems so obvious.
I was too.
That it was so obvious. And I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking back in one of my leagues, Dynasty League I'm in. I was looking back at the at my transaction history, and I traded Darren Waller for someone who I thought was a great pick at the time, and now I'm like, son of a bitch. That would have been nice to have had old Dare Wall still on my team.
But yeah, I mean, no surprises here. You can take a shot on Nelson Aguilar, who has risen from the dead. Good for him.
Good for you, Nelson. Way to learn how to catch a football these days.
And like tough catches. He's looking good. It's not just box score stuff. Like, he looks very good.
Maybe it's a toxic situation in Philadelphia that brings players down and not players' talents. Who knows?
I think we've all seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and can just assume that's how everyone in Philadelphia is.
I feel like that's a fair assumption. People watch The Departed and think that's how all Bostonians are. So I feel like tomato. Let's move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars heading to Houston to take on the Texans. And Clark, you're excited because this is the first game we get to see Deshaun Watson no longer under the thumb of the chin dimple of Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, I think fantasy-wise, this is going to be a good game. Neither one of these defenses could stop anything. And wondering, and I was trying to think of an analogy, but nope, didn't. So I'm going to be curious to see if David Johnson retains the starter and main running back job now that we've had a bit of a coaching shakeup, to see if Duke can get in there and maybe assert himself as the faster, younger back. Then I'm also curious to see what's going to happen to Kenny Stills and Brandon Cooks, because I think Will Fuller has asserted that he is the number one, and he's going to have to grow into that. But I think he's kind of unquestionably the number one. They're going to need to throw the ball to someone else, and I'll just be curious to see who Watson leans on as a secondary target.
Yeah, I really think that Houston will kind of let Deshaun Watson do his thing after having a week of turnover and, on the sideline and in the front office. I don't think they'll have a whole lot of time to install anything new, so they're just going to probably turn Deshaun Watson loose, like, hey, just go out there and do what you can to win this football game. And I would be wary, if you guys haven't already, let Brandon Cooks go or figure out a way to get him off your team. But he's kind of performed some sort of disappearing act, and it's a little unfortunate. I feel like Will Fuller is the way to go. Jordan Akins has actually been a pretty efficient guy. I'm not really sure what his fantasy totals look like, but maybe see a little bit more of that.
Who would you start? Who would you rather start in this game? DJ Chark or Will Fuller?
DJ Chark.
Yeah, DJ Chark.
That was my feelings as well.
That hurts, but
it hurts Clark to say it.
It does.
But
he's
Clark,
better. He's better.
It's when you're able to take your allegiances and put them to the side for true, honest fantasy content. That's why the people keep coming back.
To be fair, Will Fuller, if he has his best game, it's outscoring DJ Chark by a lot. It's going to be like 40 points. But I just think the chances that DJ Chark has a better game are higher.
Yeah.
Both these secondaries are super soft.
All right. Before we go any further, let us take a quick ad break. Let's move on to the Cincinnati Bengals heading to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Clark and I were talking before the show. It's a game that I really like, low-key saucy. Think the Bengals could upset the Ravens, but then the realist in me is like, Pete, stop being an idiot. This is not the game that's going to happen in. I am officially putting Marquise Brown on the Dunzo list. Marquise Brown, show us something this week, or else you are going to ride the bench until you show me something. That being said, I'm going to he's on the Dunzo list, not because I don't have faith in him this week. It's because he hasn't shown me anything. I have faith in him this week. He is still a huge role in the Ravens offense. And in fact, someone, I forget who it was on Twitter. Jordan, actually, you quote tweeted it, and so you should know who it is. Sent out a video of basically Lamar Jackson overthrowing Marquise Brown multiple times. Like, Marquise Brown accounts for most of the Ravens' air yardage. He's getting a ton of targets downfield. There just haven't been on point, and he's facing a Bengals defense that's allowed the 5th most 20-plus pass plays this season. The recipe is there for the connection to finally click, and we see the Marquise Brown speedster downfield threat that we all wanted him to be this year, and we haven't gotten yet. So you are on the Dunzo list, but I think that this is going to be a week that I think it'll be a very quick period that he'll be on the Dunzo list, and he'll quickly hop off after a big performance this week.
Yeah, that name you were looking for is PFF's Ian Hartitz. He posted a video. It's just a quick compilation of some passes that are just like they're almost there. They're missing a little bit, and who knows, that could be a symptom of not getting as much work in the offseason as an offense as they want, or maybe it's just teams aren't really who they are in the first month of the season anyhow, and that could all change for the better for Baltimore. I think that kind of stretches across the whole passing game for the Ravens, though. They need more out of their other guys. They need more out of Miles Boykin, out of as much as they can get out of Willie Snead. I'm not sure how much that is anymore. And Mark Andrews, too. Mark Andrews hasn't really done a whole lot, and Lamar's missed him on a couple of throws as well that, like, just watching their red zone throws, he's had a couple of touchdown opportunities that he just hasn't been able to corral in because the pass has just been a tiny bit off the mark. So hopefully they correct that against a Bengals team that will let you score on them.
Yeah, it might be a Gus Edwards week, as much as I like to pick the upsets in our weekly site rankings. I think that Gus Edwards could get a lot of run here. I don't see the Bengals putting up, the Bengals have been scoring. I just see them getting absolutely trounced in this game, and the Ravens just running all day. Yeah, I would definitely play Marquise Brown this week, though.
Oh, okay. Marquise Brown or Miles Sanders. That's
Brown.
My flex. Marquise Brown. Okay. All right.
I'll go Miles Sanders.
Oh, Jordan.
Perfect. We've covered every angle.
God damn it. This podcast is so unhelpful to me. This is the only reason I have this show is for you guys to set my lineup each week, so I have someone to blame other than myself. All right, let's move on to the Carolina Panthers heading to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. And holy goodness, is this a matchup for fantasy managers everywhere? Good Lordy.
I mean, Curtis Samuel, Russell Gage, Bobby Hill. I mean, you're getting everybody into this game.
Yeah, what's the Julio Jones status?
I think he's out.
It looked like he got rushed back and he left the game early after trying to go last week. So I think that it's probably best if he sits, perhaps.
I agree.
God, you got to hope for a Calvin Ridley bounce back because he uncharacteristically got blanked. Like,
that goose egg was not great.
Like, Jair Alexander is a good cornerback, and he's probably one of the better ones in the league. But Calvin Ridley is good enough to at least grab a couple of catches, like, even if he doesn't find the end zone. So that's, if there's any indication there, he's bouncing all the way back. Like,
same thing with
grab 3 touchdowns.
Same thing with Matt Ryan. If you're a Matt Ryan manager, don't panic. Like, keep starting him. Panthers defense is trash. Also, this is going to be a big running back game. Mike Davis and Todd Gurley, I think, are going to eat. But Clark, you'll be appreciative of this. Last week was my Will Fuller wide receiver 1 week. This week is my Robbie Anderson wide receiver 1 week. He's my wide receiver 11 this week, and I just think that he is going to absolutely feast because he is the number 1 receiver in Carolina's offense. So we're going to treat him as such, and he's going to feast against a Falcons defense that can't stop the pass.
We might actually see like a DJ Moore double-digit game going
Fingers
on
crossed.
here.
I would love me some DJ Moore bounce back.
Secondary guys were already thin in Atlanta, but they were dropping like flies on Monday night. So
wasn't great. Let's continue our way. Miami Dolphins heading to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. Deebo Samuel set his feet on the field last week, caught 3 balls for stats and information. Do your shit. Deebo Samuel for some yardage. Looked good, looked healthy. 3 balls, 35 yards, 1 rush for 10 yards. That's some good numbers going up against a Miami Dolphins team that's allowing the most passing yards per target this season. So if you've been waiting all season to fire up Deebo Samuel, well, fire him up with confidence.
Yeah, Deebo looks like he's going to just kind of keep on continuing to work into the offense, and that just means he's going to keep getting better and better despite who is at quarterback for the Niners, because Kyle Shanahan's offense is one of those that schemes guys open, and they get a lot of like crossers and rub routes that have defenders just running into each other all the time. So guys are going to be open, and all you need is moderately competent quarterback play in order to hit those. Another guy from the San Francisco 49ers that I'm going to be playing is George Kittle. I don't know if you heard of him. No. I'm just kidding.
Hot flame take from Jordan.
No, it's actually Brandon Ayuk. He's been putting up double-digit points. Last week, it was pretty much buoyed by 1 play, and you might assume that Deebo Samuel's return can affect Brandon Ayuk's scoring output, but I think that what the Niners proved with Deebo Samuel being out is that they don't have any other competent wide receivers outside of Kittle and Deebo Samuel. So I think Brandon Ayuk, as he's a young rookie, and as he continues to keep breaking big plays and being a guy who he kind of looks like he's a guy that can change the course of a game with 1 play. So they're going to try to put the ball in his hands at some point and scheme him open for a big play. So I think if you're looking for somebody, again, it's one of those situations where if you have a canceled game or an injury that you need to fill, he's a great dart throw if you're calling it a dart throw.
Let's continue. New York Giants heading to Dallas to take on the Cowboys in a battle, Clark, for NFC East supremacy, as they are all defeated.
Yeah, you might get something out of the Giants backfield this week. We might have to put up with Daniel Jones is really as good as we all thought he was, and look at how great he looked out there against the Cowboys. And unfortunately, someone's going to have to win this game, and it's going to be tough for everybody.
Who do the Cowboys play?
Giants.
Oh yeah, you just said Daniel Jones. See, short-term memory when it comes to football. Yeah, it's somebody's going to have to win this game. The Giants they've looked feisty at times. So I think, given that it would be a division game against the Cowboys, who are just utterly hated rivals for them, that I think that it's going to be it might be one of those games where somebody comes out and it's like, oh, the Giants are leading at one point, because the Cowboys defense can't stop anybody. They
really can't.
Literally, they might be worse than the Panthers, the Jags, the Bengals defense. It's not good. And the Giants don't have a whole lot of fantasy options. Darius Slayton, Daniel Jones might be worth a stream. Golden Tate is back in action if he's not suspended. So on that side of the ball, it looks great as far as matchup goes. On the other side of the ball, Dalton Schultz, baby.
Dalton Schultz. Yeah, against tight ends, the Giants are actually pretty good, but Dalton Schultz has been balling. So I would trust a Cowboys offense that's been rolling to continue to roll over a Giants defense that's been to suddenly put the clamps down on the Cowboys. Also,
they might as well each just trot out 11 tackling dummies and see what team can score the most.
Also, officially, Michael Gallup is the Cowboys' third wide receiver. We are officially recognizing that he is no longer the Cowboys' number 2 wide receiver.
Let's say bounce back game for Gallup this week. Let's get right with the Giants.
All right, Clark. I approve your optimism. I like it. All right, let's move on to the Indianapolis Colts taking their mighty tough defense to Cleveland to take on the Browns, who are coming off of a very successful win against the Cowboys, but a lot of it, as you said, Jordan, coming because the Cowboys can't stop a nosebleed. Meanwhile, the Colts defense is top 5 in fantasy points to wide receivers and is number 2 to fantasy points to running backs.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this game because I think these are two really weird teams. I believe the Colts are 3-1, right?
Yes.
Or
are they?
Yeah, so both are. Well, anyway, I know the Browns are 3-1, but both are teams that you're not entirely certain they deserve their record. 3-1, you kind of, if you watch these teams play, you're kind of like, are they actually 3-1? You don't know based on the teams that they played if they're actually playing good teams against good defenses, especially looking at the way Phillip Rivers has played and the way T.Y. Hilton has taken on his persona of ghost to a whole new level. I wanted to make a point, though, going forward, that you might just want to find a way to start tight ends against the Cleveland Browns defense. This, of course, does include Mo Alie-Cox, the Mack truck, because Browns tight ends, I looked this up. I wanted to see, tight ends against the Browns. I wanted to look up and see how they were doing. Mark Andrews, week 1, 5 catches, 52 yards, 2 touchdowns, 22.8 fantasy points. Week 2, decent. Drew Sample, CJ Uzoma, they both got some tick there. Sample had 7 catches, 45 yards, so 11 fantasy points. Uzoma had 4 catches, 42 yards, and a touchdown, so 14 fantasy points there. If you combine those two together, 25 fantasy points for a single tight end. Logan Thomas, this was the only blip, but of course it's the Washington football team. 4 catches, 31 yards, only 6 fantasy points. But then last week, Dalton Schultz had 4 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. So 17.2 fantasy points. You just kind of have to look at the roster in this case. The Browns have a pretty solid front, but they don't really have a lot of guys at the second and third levels that can cover athletic tight ends. Mo Alie-Cox, he might be one of the biggest people in football. And he's having a better season than all those tight ends that I just listed. He's second in tight ends for DVOA, so he's being very efficient, and he's making that connection with Phillip Rivers, kind of like another former tight end who was once a basketball player named Antonio Gates. So I would start Mo Alie-Cox comfortably as your tight end, but if you were fortunate enough to pick Mo Alie-Cox off the waivers earlier this season and you're already running like a Travis Kelce or a George Kittle, I would still start Mo Alie-Cox in the flex position. Run that 2 tight end set out there and see what happens. That's what you should be doing at this point.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that we'll, again, see a lot of passes to the running backs exacerbated by the Browns front 4 that you mentioned. They are getting to the quarterback effectively, and the Phillip Rivers solution to that is always just to throw to the running back, even though the Colts offensive line is pretty good. So big question marks about what's going to happen with Odell. I think last week was his high water mark. That's not being, I don't think, extremely bold, but it'll be interesting to see if they have solved whatever the Odell Beckham problem was, or if it was just the Cowboys being get right for offenses.
Yeah, the Colts secondary allowing the second fewest yards to wide receivers, but 5 touchdowns, which is pretty high. So there's potential for Odell to be low yardage, and you're hoping for that touchdown for him in order to play. Do you guys have any feelings in terms of D'Ernest Johnson, who is a hot waiver wire target, going up against the Colts defense that is very stout against the run and hasn't given up much?
Unless we hear that Kareem Hunt is limited in practice, limited on Friday, I think I'm avoiding it. unless I am just absolutely desperate, because the Browns running game has been a bright spot for them. You wonder if that's Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, or if it's just their team. I am not willing to say that after watching the Cowboys' putrid performance last week.
Yeah, the Browns offensive line has been stellar. They've just been rolling people over and keeping Baker clean as much as possible. And I'm just kind of skeptical if Kareem Hunt is good to go, whether or not this offense is just like, you know what, we're gonna turn around and hand the ball off to Kareem Hunt 33 times because he is our stud, and they were only splitting Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt carries because you have two really good running backs and you should get the ball to your best players. So Dearness Johnson, I wouldn't start him this week and assume that he's going to get the same sort of fantasy points that Kareem Hunt has been getting behind Nick Chubb.
I like that. I like that a lot. All right, we got 3 games left. Broncos heading to New England to take on the Patriots. Obviously, this is a game to monitor, given the fact that the Patriots have had 3 players now test positive for COVID. So we will see whether or not this game gets played, but it seems like currently all systems go. Well done, NFL. One of those players, like I said, was Stephon Gilmore. So with Gilmore out, I now like Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy had that ridiculous Moss catch against the Jets, but then didn't really do much outside of that. I think the thing is I don't think that Jerry Jeudy is going to be a wide receiver 2 even this week. But I do think that if you are trusting him to be a flex or a wide receiver 4 option for you, or a wide receiver 3, that you can fire him up this week. If Gilmore was healthy and this was the typical Patriots defense, I was going to say completely avoid him. But I do like him this week as he was able to kind of get on the scoreboard and make a big play, and that might give more confidence for whatever the guy's name is. I just want to say Jeff Driscoll because that's my go-to name for like a shitty
Rippin,
backup
right?
quarterback. But it's Ripien tossing the rock.
Yeah, anyone not named Melvin Gordon, I'm really looking to avoid. And if I got lucky and picked up James Robinson or something like that, and it's between Robinson and Gordon, I would much rather take Robinson or even Gibson or even Gaskins down in Miami. I don't know. I think the Patriots defense is yet again extremely legit.
Yeah, they were great against what's his name? Clyde Edwards-Helaire last week.
Oh, I thought you were what's his naming Pat Mahomes. I was like, Pete.
They were, oh God, he's the quarterback for the Chiefs, and his name escapes me every time because he's just average. Yes, they were also great against Pat Mahomes. Joe Montana.
I loved that Jets Broncos game last week because Brett Rippon just got the whole the analyst. I spoke to his dad treatment, and he had like, I want to play in the NFL on his ceiling or something ridiculous like that. And then almost immediately after that story, the wheels just came off and he just kind of fell apart. And that was like post Jerry Jeudy tremendous catch. So
you'll have to see it.
Broncos are in some trouble.
Broncos are in serious trouble. Patriots wise, fire up Damian Harris. Damian Harris is the lead back in that backfield, but facing a tough defense. But I also like me Julian Edelman because Jared Stidham is just going to pepper him with targets. Pew pew. That's what peppering sounds like. Okay, 2 games. What is this? Sunday night we're talking about? Minnesota heading to Seattle. That's gonna be a good game. Vikings versus Seahawks, and this is a game, you guys, where fire the cannons. Am I wrong in saying that? Clark
no, definitely not.
Head. That's what no means.
Good for a bit sound
audio medium.
The Vikings have been like decimated by injuries on defense, and Pete Carroll came out and said today that Jamal Adams is already out this week. So they are losing their probably best secondary defender and best pass rusher. So if Kirk Cousins can get some things right, I think that Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen are both ready to play. And on the other side, Russ has been an MVP candidate, so you kind of just want a piece of that, and you got to play DK, Lockett. I'm not sure. What's Chris Carson's status? Is he?
He's playing.
Okay?
I think he's good to go and he's playing. I know that was mild frustration with Chris Carson like sneaking into the field last second and then scoring a lot of fantasy points last week.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
Chris, we'll talk about this on Twitter.
Chris Carson.
We'll talk about this off the air on Twitter, Chris. I know you and I are besties, so we'll discuss. Yeah, I have Adam Thielen as my wide receiver 1 this week. Justin Jefferson is wide receiver 19 for me. I've heard some people being like showing some trepidation with firing up Tyler Lockett after his dud. Fire up Tyler Lockett. Like Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, they're going to feast. This game is going to be who scores 41st, and it's all going to come through the air. So fire up all pass catchers. Fire up everyone. Everyone in this game, fire them up. Not fire them. Fire them up. And now, the final game for week 5.
Is that the Ginger Woodman's music?
It's here! The final game! Monday Night Football, and Nick has come in to give us his expert advice about the Los Angeles Chargers heading to New Orleans to take on the Saints. I know this is the only game you wanted to talk about, Nick, so we saved it just for you.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, no, I'm sure it wasn't a scheduling thing that led to this, but the key to this game is going to be the health of the Saints secondary. So Lattimore and George Jenkins were both injured last week. We need to pay attention to what's going on with them, because if they are banged up, then Herbert is like all systems go as a like high-end quarterback 1. He's going to scramble, that's good always. But if he has a clear runway to just launch bombs to Keenan Allen, that's like, if you need a quarterback, he's your guy.
He's my Cam Newton replacement.
Yeah, we were on this last week, and I'll say it again. It's time to fire up Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara. I think the Saints have figured out that running the ball with both of those guys is going to be a recipe for success while Michael Thomas is out. Both backs look good with their misdirection. I think if they don't actually lean into the misdirection as much and just have it as window dressing to run Latavius Murray up the middle off guard constantly. It worked really well against a poor Detroit team. I think we'll see something similar against a very stout outside rush of the Chargers with Murray and Kamara both on the field, both fire them up. I started one as a running back and one as a flex last week, and I'll be doing that again.
I was going to come into this saying Latavius Murray maybe hit the brakes on, just because the Chargers are the only team to have not given up a rushing touchdown this year so far, and now that could break with Latavius Murray. But they have given up like league average in terms of yards. So I think that there's still work for Latavius Murray on the ground to get you a solid fantasy work. But I don't, we'll see about those touchdowns. Maybe he's the only back who can break the trend.
Well, I think one thing about this backfield combination that we had with Mark Ingram, even more so, but with Latavius Murray is a decent wide receiver. He keeps you honest, and when you leave him out there by himself, he will burn you, because he is a big head of steam kind of guy like Derrick Henry. And then they'll stuff Kamara up the middle a couple of times a game too, just to keep everybody honest. That's one of the reasons I think this is so effective, is both backs can do both things, and defenses kind of forget that.
I like it. Nick, since you missed the entire show because you were off doing God knows what, who is becoming a pirate, who is one player this week that you think people are going to start that they shouldn't, or vice versa, someone who maybe people are tentative starting that you want to give them the utmost faith and confidence in starting?
I'm just going to shoot.
You only get one, Nick.
There. Okay, yeah, I was just going to shout this person's name at the end regardless. Falcons receiver Olamide Zaccheaus. Dude's playing the Julio role this week in Carolina. Yep. Julio's out, hamstring. Russell Gage, I think he's still in the concussion protocol. You are getting the number 2 receiver on the Falcons for week 5. And, I mean, look at his usage last week. He had like 10 targets. Yeah, fire him up. If you need a receiver, fire him up.
Love it. I love it, Nick. Nick's one play this week is a guy's name that I just have no idea what it is.
Olamide Zaccheaus.
What a fucking name. Holy shit. That's incredible. All right. Well, there you go. There is all the starts and sits that you need to know for week 5. Make sure you subscribe to the Fake Teams podcast, wherever you get your podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. That is how you'll not only get us, but also our fantasy basketball and our fantasy baseball podcast. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at RB1 Podcast. If you have any fantasy conundrums, tweet them at us. We'd love to help you out and respond, and we will take the blame if our advice fails. Follow myself at Pete M. Rogers. Follow Clark at NFL Clark. Jordan at Jordan_Smith27, and Nick at Ginger__Nick without a K. We will be back at you next week. Best of luck to everyone in their Week 5 matchups. Until then, peace.